I'm one.
Boy, they're looking great. Aren't they looking great? Any Yankees fans?
They're
No, you're a
doing
Mets
good.
fan.
Well, and also the Red Sox, because they hate the Yankees.
Well, that's good.
I hate the Yankees.
That's good. We need to go out and see a Mets game.
We should do, well, I got to win a few first.
That's all right. Citi Field's amazing. That's
They
a
seem very
great
sweet,
park.
the Red Sox. That Mookie is cute.
She likes that Mookie.
Okay.
All
let's see
right, so it's Monday, July 30th. Still with us, we have national affairs analyst for NBC News and MSNBC, John Heilman.
He seems very sweet.
Not really.
Not so much.
NBC News foreign correspondent Keir Simmons. He's adorable. Former aide to the George W. Bush White House and State Department's Elise Jordan, very serious. Former Treasury official Steve Ratner, he's got the numbers. And Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and author of The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels, the Soul of America himself, John Meacham.
John Meacham, you've made so much money on that book. Will you buy me a boat? I want a boat.
He
I think you
does.
can buy me
He really
because
wants
you're
a
so
boat.
rich. Have all your relatives been calling and asking for things because you're so rich now because of that book?
No, because I don't actually answer the phone, so
Everyone
it works
loves
that way.
the book. I've heard
We have
a
like
lot
a
about
Green
it.
Acres phone.
Yes.
You know, Eddie Albert. You know, we go up on top of Mr. Drucker's store, so
Yeah.
I just stay off the roof.
So you have Arnold the Pig answer the phone for you.
Exactly.
But what would be cool about that, if you got the boat, right, it would be the boat that was paid for by the Soul of America. And that would be kind of an awesome thing.
You call it the Soul of America.
Yeah.
Joining the conversation.
Wait, I got a quick question to ask
Oh, my God,
Conlon.
please, just stop.
As you are comparing 1960s sitcom animals, all right? We've got a showdown between Arnold the Pig on Green Acres,
Yeah.
the smartest
Pig in the history of television.
Well, the smartest person in town, too, the smartest animal in town.
Yeah.
Versus Mr. Ed. Who do you go with?
Oh, the pig.
Arnold the Pig?
100%.
Oh.
Yeah.
I kind of liked Mr. Ed.
I mean, I like the talking thing is kind of cool. Like
Right. You'd never talk in front of a
notion
robot?
the notion that a horse could talk. I like that, but the pig is the smartest creature in the whole
My
thing.
pig's really smart.
Your pigs are smart,
Oh
right?
my God, my
Oh, my
pig
God,
is so
he's
smart. My
very
mom
smart.
loves the pig.
Your pigs can do higher math, I've heard.
She opens locks. All
Better
right.
in math than me.
Also
News,
joining us, political reporter for the Washington Post and moderator of Washington Week on PBS, Robert Costa.
Not alive when either Green Acres or Mr. Ed was airing.
but brilliant. And law professor at George Washington University, Jonathan Turley, joins us.
Jonathan
as well.
knows what I'm talking
so
about.
let's start
Darn
with the
right
news.
I do.
Arnold
It's Mr.
or
Ed, by the way.
Arnold or Mr. Ed?
It's
He
Mr.
already
Ed.
answered.
It's Mr. Ed. Good. I think I'm
He's
with
just
you
threatened
over
by
Arnold.
the pig because he thinks Arnold might be smarter than him.
I'm
Turley.
sorry.
I don't
It is a
think
wonderful-
so.
And the Chicago Cubs is the greatest baseball team on earth.
Wow.
Oh, good God.
So he's going to start like
Cut
that,
the
huh?
feed.
Yes, we
Okay. Let's get right to the news. President Trump spent part of his weekend lashing out and questioning the credibility of Robert Mueller's ongoing investigation. In a series of tweets yesterday, Trump claimed there was no collusion, and since he says so, he thinks everyone should believe
1,000
him.
times.
And he called Mueller's probe a witch hunt and an illegal scam. He went on to write nervously, is Robert Mueller ever going to release his conflicts of interest with respect to President Trump, including the fact that we had a very nasty
What,
and
is he Napoleon
contentious
now?
business relationship? I turned him down to head the FBI one day before appointment as special counsel, and Comey is his close friend. Also, why is Mueller only appointing angry Dems, some of whom have worked for crooked Hillary, including himself? Others, including himself, have worked for Obama. And why isn't Mueller looking at all of the criminal activity and real Russian collusion on the Democrat side? Podesta dossier? NBC News reached out to the special counsel's office.
What a surprise.
But received no response.
So, Jonathan, just curious, where are you right now with a lot of things have happened over the past couple of weeks, and obviously Donald Trump lashing out furiously at the special counsel, at independent counsel. It's as if he expects something to drop over the next week or two. Where are you right now on the Mueller investigation, what you know of it, and where you think it's headed?
Well, I think the Cohen development is very serious. I mean, he's one witness away from a potential catastrophe. If any of those 5 witnesses breaks and supports Michael Cohen, this is going to get real bad real fast. It is not that the meeting will establish a crime of collusion, even if what Cohen is saying is true. But what it would mean is that Donald Trump Jr. would be in serious jeopardy of a criminal charge. If Mueller was to go after Donald Trump Jr., I think we would see a very rapid chain of events, and it would not end well for anyone. I think that Donald Trump very well could match his past visceral language with similar action. He could start to fire people, and that would have a cascading effect. It would probably take us right to the doorstep of impeachment. Now, thus far, there isn't any cooperation for Michael Cohen. And the fact is, he's not a very credible person. I mean, unlike Rudy Giuliani, most of us have actually heard of bad things about Michael Cohen. You have to be, he must have been on an ashram for the last year not to have heard bad things about Michael Cohen. But Cohen is really not redeemable as a witness. He needs to have support from some of the people in that room.
And Robert Costa, what can you tell us about the attitude inside the White House? What's going on there? Why Donald Trump went on a screed again yesterday morning? We've seen in the past he usually does it when the heat's turned up on him. What happened this weekend?
My sources meeting with them over the weekend, they're on high alert, Joe, because they say, look at what's happening on Capitol Hill. Don't ignore it with regard to the Mueller investigation. You have top Trump allies like Mark Meadows of North Carolina, Jim Jordan of Ohio, proposing these articles of impeachment, now a contempt of Congress for Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. And that option is just sitting out there for President Trump, being proffered by his allies, saying if you do want to move on Mueller, if you do believe you have an excuse to go after the Department of Justice over this document fight, you could also go after Rosenstein. And it's just sitting there as a political target, and that has made some Trump allies on edge that if Mueller does start to take some real action legally, that the president could consider making some moves at DOJ.
But you know, though, John Heilemann, I know there are a couple of backbenchers that are going after Rod Rosenstein.
Yeah.
At the same time, you have Republicans in the United States Senate shoulder to shoulder in support of Robert Mueller, in support of the investigation moving forward. You had Richard Burr, the chairman of the Senate Intel Committee, saying last week that all the FISA warrants made sense and were logical, no wrongdoing there whatsoever. You talk about open warfare among Republicans.
Yeah.
I mean, the Saturday Night Massacre wouldn't just be playing out between the White House and the Justice Department. It would be 80% of the Senate and, you know, probably 50% of the House Republicans going after each other and the president. It would be a bloodbath 99 days out.
100%. And I think that was true. The broad support for Rod Rosenstein among Senate Republicans and even many House Republicans who don't want to say so publicly, that was true before Helsinki. After Helsinki, the degree of strength that Rosenstein has among everyone but the Devin Nunes caucus and the Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows caucus, who are engaging in this sort of ridiculous impeach Rod Rosenstein. It's all just pure kabuki. He's never going to be impeached. There's never going to be a vote of any kind. It's never going to happen. But all of the extent that there is a caucus that likes to make that kind of noise, the counter caucus, the broad support among establishment Republicans for Rosenstein, is off the charts after Helsinki.
Boy, post Helsinki, you really have to be taking your political future into your own hands, even as a Republican, if you're going after Robert Mueller's indictment of, what is he, how many, 23 Russians now?
Yeah.
And clear evidence, just in black and white, that they tried to rig the 2016 election.
They tried to intervene. Yeah, I mean, I think you can't underestimate how much the Russians are watching. We talk about the American foreign policy you should always view through American domestic policy. The Russians know that. When I speak to people in the Kremlin, I get a clear impression that they understand the politics here and that they are making moves. So just for example, after Helsinki, someone in the Kremlin told me, we're not going to talk about this anymore. You know, we need to keep quiet about this now. You won't hear anything from us. Now, of course, now we've had President Putin offer President Trump the meeting in Moscow.
Now, I don't like Washington in the fall. You're my patsy. You come to Moscow.
Right. I mean, you know, I think you can underestimate that again and again. You remember when I was in North Korea last year, and a North Korean official told me, we watch Morning Joe.
Of course they do.
Oh, my God.
Right? Huge.
People are watching. It's like...
Very strong in the demo.
Yeah.
This country is going through this incredible angst, and clearly that has to happen. But don't underestimate how around the world it is being watched.
The world's watching.
Well, and so, John Meacham, you know, where is the soul of America in the age of devalued truth, starting at the top, and a relationship with Russia that we could never expect?
Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set ye free. That will out. It doesn't. Lies are good starters, but they're not good finishers. And again in American life, we've had periods where we have distrusted institutions. We've had people who thought they could put a fast one past us, and sometimes they did for a time. But ultimately, the great experiment in self-government that the founders put together created a document, created an ethos that, because it takes into account that we're flawed, that we're driven by appetite and ambition, it gave us a chance for reason to take a stand against passion in the arena. This is what the Constitution was made for. It would have stunned the founders, stunned them, that it would have taken until 2016 to get a demagogue like this as president. And the document was created to try to check our worst impulses. And Joe McCarthy took 4 years. Watergate took 27 months. Jim Crow took a century. You know, we've been in dark places before, and we just have to remember that what makes us best is when we're strong and when we open our arms.
Elise Jordan.
Jonathan Turley, Elise here. Your latest column is just about how Michael Cohen is panicked and that makes him dangerous. And you were talking about some of the behavior that we might see if Donald Trump Jr. is himself more imperiled. What is Michael Cohen at this point still hoping for a pardon and acting out, or has that ship really sailed?
Yeah, no, I think that Donald Trump is probably more likely to give Hillary Clinton a pardon right now than Michael Cohen. Any pardon strategy is gone. This is sort of a mutually assured destruction strategy by Cohen. I don't really get it. Usually you threaten that. You don't actually commit the act, but he started out with that. So the pardon, I think, is no longer an option. He's putting all of his money on Mueller. I'm not too sure that strategy is going to play out for him. He's not that valuable of a witness in one sense, and he is in another. His proximity makes him very dangerous to the president. But, you know, to have your lawyer, Lanny Davis, say, you know, Michael's going to try something new. He's going to try telling the truth. You know, that's not a roaring endorsement. You know, it's basically saying I'm John Dean without the guilt. You know, it's not really that great of a witness to put on the stand unless you got someone to stand next to him.
All right, Jonathan Turley, thank you very much. President Trump used Twitter to once again threaten to shut down the federal government over the battle for tougher immigration laws. The president tweeted yesterday morning, "I would be willing to, quote, shut down government if Democrats do not give us the votes for border security, which includes
Republicans
the wall."
are the majority, by the way.
Yeah.
Both houses.
Must get rid of lottery, catch and release, etc. And finally go to system of immigration based on merit. We need great people coming into our country. Trump's warning comes ahead of the September 30th deadline for Congress to strike a deal to fund the government, raising the possibility of a showdown just 37 days before the midterm elections. The potential funding battle would also come amid efforts by Republicans to confirm the president's Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh by October 1st. Following his meeting on Wednesday with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Paul Ryan, President Trump reportedly signaled that he was on board with the leader's strategy to fund the government through smaller packages of spending bills. McConnell said Friday that talks over funding the border wall would probably have to wait until after the midterms.
Of
And Bob Costa, I think immigration's a great issue to go into the midterms with, to remind everybody of the stench around this presidency pertaining to the separation of families that is still going on, where there are hundreds, at least hundreds of children who may never be reunited with their families ever again because of President Trump, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, and Ivanka Trump by default, since she is counselor to the president in support of families.
Are Republicans afraid of the shutdown?
Well, Mika makes an important point about immigration, but Mika, it depends on where we're looking at the map. Ivanka Trump, for example, in 2016 went to the suburbs of Philadelphia, and vulnerable Republicans right now are very uneasy about the president focusing on immigration. But talking to my sources, they say the president's talk about this so-called witch hunt, his words about the Russia investigation really hammering the proposed border wall, it's all about juicing up that Republican base, because talking to pollsters inside of the party and people who have conducted focus groups, they are concerned that a blue wave could be coming, that the 4.1% quarterly growth, the tax cut, not enough to get the Trump voter to come back out in the midterm election. So it's back to the wall. It's back to immigration. It's back to going after Robert Mueller. That's the closing strategy you can expect to hear when the president, for example, goes to Pennsylvania this week for a rally in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Boy, that is, Steve Ratner, that is a rough strategy for Donald Trump, and I'm sure probably speaks to why Republicans are afraid of him coming to the district. And, you know, even you've talked about it this morning already. The Times has a story on the front page, but poll after poll after poll shows the rank and file just aren't buying this tax cut. In fact, it's deeply unpopular, especially among working class Americans, that Republicans need.
Yeah, it's got, I think, a 34% approval rating, but what the rank and file, you know, Americans got to give them a little bit of credit for figuring things out, and what they figured out is that 85% of this tax cut is going to business or people making over $75,000 a year. I think the average American gets something like $600, so it's not a lot of money. I think on the shutdown question, first of all, I think there's something like 13 legislative days left between now and the election. They're not exactly working at full speed, and so there's a lot at risk here, and I think history would tell you that shutdowns hurt the party that is perceived to have created the shutdown.
I can tell you that.
You can tell me that.
I can tell you that.
And,
it's not a good thing.
But they do need some Democrats. You know, they need 60 votes in the Senate, so they are going to have to get some Democrats to get over the finish line.
It's going to be awfully tough. Keir, want to talk about London again. It's on my mind since I can't talk about Chelsea. Let's talk about Theresa May and Boris Johnson. News this week. I don't know if it's accurate or not that Boris Johnson now is becoming good buddies with Steve Bannon. True? Yeah, I mean, you see those reports?
Well, Steve Bannon has been in the UK and has been making friends. And not just with the former Foreign Secretary, but with others on much further to the right.
Do we expect a challenge to Theresa May from Boris Johnson and the far right?
Just put simply, what's happening in the UK is that the government is hanging by a thread, and what the Conservative government is really frightened of is that if they break that thread and go for a general election, that they end up with a very far left Labour Party in power. That, by the way, would turn things upside down. I mean, the leader of the Labour Party in the UK has some sympathy for Russia. He has interesting views on Europe. The potential for things to really unravel around Brexit and then echo around the world economically, which is where folks here should really, worry about it, I guess, is great.
Is there a possibility of another coalition government in Britain if we get to a point where it looks like you're going to have Boris Johnson teaming up with UKIP and other right-wing parties?
Well, you'd probably need another election to have that happen, and you just can't predict the outcome of an election, particularly the way that the electorate are these days, both here and in the UK. So what's happening is very detailed internal politics within the ruling party in Britain, with the big picture of them desperately trying to cling on to power.
Keir Simmons, thank you very much. Great to have you on with us this morning. And Robert Costa, thank you as well.
Robert, what are you working on today?
keeping an eye on the Mueller investigation. Where is this report? When is a subpoena coming for President Trump? Is Rudy Giuliani going to continue to dance around the idea of doing an interview or not? Decisions have to be made on both sides.
Still ahead on Morning Joe, from cruel and inhumane to careless and incompetent. That's how Senator Richard Blumenthal describes the government's initial child separation policy and subsequent efforts to deal with it. The Connecticut Democrat joins us next on Morning Joe. The Judiciary and Armed Services Committee's Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut is introducing a resolution today on protecting the press. We'll get to that. Curious as to what you know about where the separation policy stands. We know they ended the policy, but there's still a lot of children's lives hanging in the balance. Are they going to be able to resolve this completely?
Hundreds of children are still separated from their parents.
Do we have a good number on that? Are we in the hundreds?
There are no good numbers.
No good numbers
Right.
still. Why aren't there good numbers still? Why can't we get the government? Why can't we get the Trump administration to give us good numbers on how many children they seized from the arms of their parents and have now lost?
That is the question we're going to be asking tomorrow when we have ICE come before the Judiciary Committee. We're going to have a hearing. And the question of whether this policy is the result of incompetence and carelessness or deliberate cruelty, I think right now what we have is malign neglect. The children are still separated because of the incompetence and perhaps carelessness, but the policy itself, and Americans should be really angry about it, is the result of consciously and purposely inflicted cruelty.
Right. Yeah, the focus on ICE actually is misdirected. The focus is on the policy that this would be like Americans being angry at TSA if Donald Trump decided to seize babies from a mother's arms when they're going through the metal detectors.
That is exactly right, and that's why we've urged the chairman of the committee, Chuck Grassley, to have not just ICE, but also the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the Department of Homeland Security's leadership in general, and the Department of Health and Human Services. They all bear responsibility.
So why are they still separated? What's at the crux of that? Have the parents been deported? Are the parents out of the country and now the kids are stuck in America? What's happened?
Some of the parents have been deported on the promise that they would be reunited. That was a false promise. Some of the parents are still in this country, but the Department of Homeland Security doesn't have sufficient information to bring them together. We've received closed briefings, and the basic conclusion here is that this policy is a result of a conscious effort to deter asylum seekers from coming to this country by convincing them that they will face more pain here than they would by facing the murder, violence, and gang warfare in their own country.
So I understand that's what Sessions, that's what Trump wanted to happen. What I don't understand is when they implemented the policy, how were they not able to trace? How are they not able to put 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds back with their parents? Who ultimately fumbled that responsibility?
And that's what the American people deserve to know, and we don't know the answer yet. We're going to begin finding out tomorrow, but I think there has to be accountability.
But isn't it remarkable we don't know? Isn't it remarkable?
Was there even a plan? Was there a plan?
There was no plan. You know, when I visited the border, Elise, now almost 6 weeks ago, what I saw, and I said it when I came back, was no plan, no path, no system for reuniting these children with their parents. I looked into the eyes of a 2-year-old girl in her father's arms who faced possible separation from her father, and he was close to tears. But he had walked 30 days across Mexico to escape the violence and persecution in his country simply so his daughter could live and have the opportunity to be in this country. But there was no plan to keep them together. There was no plan to reunite them if they were separated. There never was, and that is the really untold story.
I feel like we have to call a timeout right here for viewers who may not understand the laws of this land. it is legal for people to come to this country and seek refugee status. And when they come here, that's when we're supposed to have a review. And we're supposed to have judges, courts look at it. And of course, Donald Trump's answer is separate the children, deport the parents, and fire all the judges. He says he doesn't want any judges anymore. He doesn't want any more due process for refugee status, which again, that's the basis of our country. Donald Trump's parents, Donald Trump's mother came to America from overseas. Mika's mother and father escaped Hitler, came to America. Mika's mother went across the Atlantic, actually the boat got hit by a German torpedo, which was a thud, but escaped Nazi oppression.
And so did my dad. In 1935, came here at 17 years old. He had not much more than this shirt on his back. He knew no one. He spoke no English. He was a penniless refugee who would have been sent back under Trump's current policies. There is a legal protection, but there's also a great American tradition.
Exactly.
Right.
That's our story.
Exactly. We're a nation of immigrants.
And Senator, something that also is really troublesome, I mean, everything about this policy is troublesome, but Texas Tribune had reporting that about 70 children under the age of 2 have been representing themselves at asylum proceedings. How is this happening in America?
I know.
No. It's remarkable.
Senator, I want to move on to a different topic
Asking
and a different venue for you, which is your role in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. Brett Kavanaugh, obviously coming before you guys at some point. You have been raising some concerns both about the scope of the committee's inquiry, the ability to get a hold of all the records from the time when he was in the White House, and also about where he stands on the question of the Nixon precedent. So I want you to talk about both those things, where we are, not about so much about the political maneuvering, but about those concerns. Will he protect Robert Mueller? How serious is the scrutiny your committee is going to give to this nomination?
First of all, we need the documents. And right now, we're being denied all the documents that we need to review this nomination. And the reason we need the documents is that there's no telling what he may have written and what's relevant when he was staff secretary to President Bush. We already know that on some of the issues like the signing statements relating to illegal detention, he took certain positions, but we need to confirm what he tells us by having all the documents. The question is what they're hiding. Why are they concealing some of these documents? I won't meet with this nominee and certainly would urge my colleagues to vote against him if we are denied those documents. Second, on the issue of presidential power, he has a very expansive view of what the president's powers can be. First of all, the president can refuse to enforce a law if he feels that it is unconstitutional. Second, he should be able to fire the special counsel for any reason or no reason at all, and that makes him a possible deciding vote. Also, on the subpoena power, he's questioned the validity of the Tapes case. That Tapes case, you'll recall, was in the Watergate era and decided unanimously by a Supreme Court in an opinion written by the Chief Justice Warren Burger, a Nixon appointee. So this questioning of the issue of whether the president's above the law is extremely serious. If his position is the president's above the law, I don't see how any of my colleagues can vote for it.
But Senator, without diminishing the importance of everything you just said, in the kind of real world of politics, it seems like the Republicans are absolutely locked in step here on whether, maybe Rand Paul, but mostly locked in step here on whether they're going to vote for it. You had 3 red state Democrats, as you know, who voted for Gorsuch. Is there really much doubt that he's going to get confirmed in the end?
I think there is doubt, Steve, mainly because in these documents, if we get them, there may be bombshells and smoking guns and other very revealing evidence that goes to his views on these critical issues, not just presidential power, but also Roe v. Wade and his committing, apparently, he passed the Trump litmus test to automatically overrule it on health care issues. So I think we need to take this case to the American people, and I think the American people are going to want a check and balance on this president particularly. I think they're going to want someone who is in favor of a free press, especially with this president.
So let's talk about Republicans and the Mueller investigation. You, of course, have a couple of House Republicans who are playing the role of Vladimir Putin's poodles, embarrassing themselves, really just being dupes, useful idiots for Vladimir Putin. But on the Republican side in the Senate, some strong words, again, from Richard Burr, the chairman of the Intel Committee, saying the FISA warrants were actually in line and the judges, the Republican judges, did the right thing there. It seems that more and more Republicans are speaking out strongly in support of Robert Mueller's investigation going to its end.
There's no question that Trump's cronies in the House are threatening impeachment of Rod Rosenstein, which is very impactful, and also threatening the special counsel. But we do have Republicans in the Senate beginning to show some signs of resistance to this consistent, concerted campaign against the special counsel. Remember, this campaign has been ongoing for some time, not just the president calling it a witch hunt, but also some of his, I hesitate to say stooges, but surrogates in the House, saying that it is all made up. We know from the close to 30 indictments and 5 convictions, there's a lot of evidence.
Of Russians, by the way, this isn't, they're not just covering for Donald Trump anymore. They're not Trump's chumps anymore. They are Vladimir Putin's useful idiots, because Mueller's indicted more Russians than Americans. This is a Russian story that these Republican dupes or in the House of Representatives, they're covering for Vladimir Putin. They should get their contributions converted to rubles now.
Well, and the remarkable thing about that indictment, if you read it, of the 12 Russians, is there is no way these Russians were freelancing. They are military intelligence operatives under orders from Vladimir Putin. Yeah. Instead of inviting him to this country, he should be indicted in this country. And the people who are cozying up to him are simply aiding and abetting an ongoing attack on this country.
It continues.
Senator Blumenthal hesitates to say stooges, but I don't think you would hesitate to say stooges.
Yes, no, we don't.
No.
Senator Richard Blumenthal, thank you so much.
I do like Putin's poodles.
That's very good. Very strong, very strong.
Because it is really, if you think about it, how remarkable that there are a few Republicans in the House of Representatives who are literally covering up an enemy's attempt to undermine American democracy. Think about how remarkable that is. How do you go back to your constituents and say, I'm trying to impeach the guy that is running an investigation against our enemies, trying to infiltrate American democracy and undermine it? Try to put that one on a bumper sticker.
Well, try.
Joe, I really think that you're doing an injustice to the dogs of America.
Putin's patsies.
Senator, thank you. We'll be watching as you present a resolution today on the press as well. We'll get to that. Coming up, the Trump-Cohen drama goes public, and it's getting really ugly. We're going to bring in both a former judge and a U.S. attorney from the office now investigating the president's former fixer. We'll be right back.
There's a common thread I see every time.
Among Republicans, tweeting yesterday morning, wow, highest poll numbers in the history of the Republican Party. That includes honest Abe Lincoln and Ronald Reagan. There must be something wrong. Please recheck that poll. And many did check. According to Gallup, Trump's approval rating among Republicans is 88%. At the same point in their presidencies, Dwight Eisenhower's approval rating was 92% among Republicans, and George W. Bush's approval was 93%, 4 and 5 points higher than Trump's, respectively. So needs to check his numbers. There's a lot of things he needs to check. He needs to really search. Up next, we have more on the conversation we were just having with Senator Blumenthal, that the White House had absolutely no plan to reunify the families that it separated at the border. We're going to bring in Jacob Soboroff, who's been on the story since the very beginning. He's the hard numbers on this. Next on Morning Joe. A very busy news day today. Provide information to locate hundreds of missing parents to reunite them with their children. A federal judge overseeing the court-ordered reunification of more than 2,500 migrant children has ordered the administration turn over a list of all parents deemed ineligible for reunification by Wednesday. Let's bring in MSNBC correspondent Jacob Sobera for more on this. Jacob, are they going to be able to track down all these families and reunite them?
That's the idea, Mika, but this thing is almost absurdly far from over. On Friday, the Trump administration basically declared victory, saying that they had reunited by this court-imposed deadline the eligible, what they call eligible, 1,880 something. I think it was 1,882 children systematically separated from their parents by the Trump administration. But remember, the overall number was over 2,500 kids. And what we learned in court from the Trump administration on Friday, I actually went down there and sat in this courtroom to listen to the judge talk to the Trump administration and watch them battle it out with the ACLU. There were 650 kids. Senator Blumenthal didn't know the number. 650 is the number of children that the government deemed ineligible to be reunited with their parents and just didn't reunite them by the court-imposed deadline. So now the judge has stepped in and basically said there are what are called missing parents. He calls them missing parents. Go find them. Here's how we're going to do it. The government was refusing to provide the ACLU information, specific detailed information that would help them track down these folks in their home countries, including 431 parents who were deported and can't get back to this country to be reunited with their children. So the next step is now this information being handed over by Wednesday and them going to track them down.
So, Jacob, you said 650. The Trump administration say 650 young children are, quote, ineligible to be reunited with their parents. Ineligible on what ground? How did they define ineligible?
Right. And, well, it's such a good question, Joe. Let me be really clear. Those children were separated in the exact same way at many of the exact same places that the kids that were deemed eligible were separated. The only issue with these children is that they say some of these parents, 431 of them were already deported. That's it. I mean, they just got deported before they could get back together with their children. That's the vast majority of this group. Another small portion of that group has some form of criminal convictions, but we don't know why or what kind of criminal conviction. And then they really focus on 120 of these parents who they say waived the right to reunification with their kids. But it's sort of a hard argument to buy, because we know from affidavits filed in court that many of those parents say, I actually signed those forms in error to give up my children. Jacob, I didn't understand them. Yeah, they were in different languages.
Jacob, are these judges raking these government bureaucrats over the coals? I can't imagine any judge with 1,000 kids missing, 600, however many it is right now. I can't imagine any judge not raking these bureaucrats over the coals and demanding that they provide answers. Are they doing that?
Of course. And the bottom line is, Joe, we wouldn't even be here with a plan for reunification if it wasn't for this judge, Judge Sabra, down in the Southern District here in California. He said very clearly on Friday there never was a plan. These were like a bunch of different stovepipes, DOJ, HHS, the Department of Homeland Security. They never even talked to each other. So he said, look, step one is getting the eligible children back together. Step two is you guys going out and finding the missing parents that you basically said were ineligible and we're going to reunite if I, the judge, didn't even tell you to go do this and come up with an actual plan to go do this. And then step three is that this never ever happens again. And all these agencies that you would think would talk to each other, they're all federal government agencies involved in the care of migrant children down at the border, would talk to each other. And they're not even talking to each other. He said this can never happen again, was basically his parting thoughts on in court on Friday.
Jacob, thank you very much. And PBS's Frontline is taking a closer look at this crisis with a new special entitled Separated Children at the Border. Here's a clip featuring an interview with former acting director of ICE, Tom Homan.
When you heard the tape the ProPublica published of the children wailing, what was your reaction?
I didn't hear the tape.
Oh, come on.
I did not hear the tape. I've heard many children cry in my 34 years. I don't need to hear children cry.
Can I play it for you?
Yeah.
It's a young girl who asks to call her aunt. She wants to call her aunt. She has the number memorized. How can you not condemn that?
Look, I've seen a lot of terrible things in my 34 years. Well, we have to address the border. I mean,
Do you not sympathize with their
Absolutely,
situation?
I'm a parent. It's sad, but when the government chooses to enforce the law and they separate the parent that's been prosecuted, just like every U.S. citizen person in this country gets separated when he gets arrested, but people want a different set of rules for an illegal alien.
And Frontline correspondent Martin Smith joins us now. Martin, obviously quite an interview. What else did you find out from the former director of ICE?
Well, look, he takes a very simple approach to this. It was abundantly clear after talking to them that he sees this as a simple case of there's a law about how you legally enter the country, and he's going to enforce it. And the president has accepted that kind of approach to this. You know, if you want to have a humane process of deciding who can come and who deserves to come, who's fleeing violence and needs asylum, you have to have judges. You have to have a robust asylum process. The president says he doesn't want judges. Well, that's what judges are for, to judge whether or not somebody can has a decent case to make. So Holman simply says, enforce the law.
Did you sense from him, and do you sense from other ICE officials and other people who have tried to tackle this issue, a frustration, a belief that you hear out of this administration that people in the past have brought children up with them to make their passage into the United States easier?
You know, he didn't harp on that, and I have heard that from some. But look, you know, I went down to Salvador for the making of this documentary, and my producer was covering this for the last year, was in Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador. These people are fleeing violence, and these children and their mothers or fathers need to get out of the situations they're in. They're not just looking to make this easy to get in.
And what's the fate of these children, especially if they can't be reunited with their families, which sounds like is a legitimate possibility for a good number of them? What will happen? What do we even know of their status right now, how they're doing?
Well, that's an excellent question, Mika. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We talked to one man who was put on a plane back to Salvador. His daughter had been separated from him at the border. He was told that if he agreed to be deported, she would be reunited. Eventually, she was reunited with him. But there are others who went back under the pretense that if they agreed to be deported, they would get their child back, which is really a violation of their right to file a claim for asylum and have a court hearing, due process. But in any case, you know, some of the, like was mentioned by Jacob, there are people that speak Quiche, which is a native language in Guatemala, who were asked to sign a form in English. They didn't know what they were getting into. There were some that were illiterate. But these are people that have legitimate claims, from what I saw, not by and large criminals, as they are described.
Martin Smith, thank you so much. The new Frontline documentary, Separated Children at the Border, premieres tomorrow night on PBS. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Let's talk about the politics of ICE. They're going to be talking to the director on the Hill. Right now, it seems most Democrats are trying to distance themselves from comments others have suggested that ICE
be abolished. Yeah, I mean, look, that tape, that interview is many Democrats, certainly the kind of the base of the party, that kind of comment, the kind of chilling tone of, well, you know, this is sad, but you know, these people broke the law. That is going to fuel this debate for Democrats, especially those thinking about running for president in 2020. You've got Kirsten Gillibrand now. You've got Elizabeth Warren, strongly on the we must abolish ICE front. You have other people like Senator Kamala Harris, who says we got to fix it. Fixing ICE is the easy position, but in this Democratic Party, where there's so much energy on the far left and in the base,
But if you're going to
have a couple of
ICE, then what replaces it?
I'm not. For the moment, I just want to say that the political dynamic here is going to pull Democrats to the left. You got a couple of big voices who are saying we must abolish it. It's going to become a litmus test, I think, pretty quick.
Wow.
If you want to run for president, you're going to have to either say you want to abolish it or you want to really radically reform it.
All right, still ahead on Morning Joe, we're going to bring in a former federal prosecutor who has some sharp advice for the president's former fixer, Michael Cohen, and a retired judge who says some Republican members of Congress may need to be investigated for trying to intimidate the Deputy Attorney General. Plus, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of both the Judiciary and Intelligence Committees. Morning Joe is coming right back.